Hi, welcome to my talk on domain-driven design. My name is Joseph Akayesi, a software engineer based in Accra, Ghana. Domain-driven design is one of the best ways to model our software. It allows us to build quality and have a shared understanding of our domain across our entire organization. Today, I'm going to show you what domain-driven design is all about. And I hope you can get interested enough to look even further into this technique of domain modeling. And so what is domain-driven design? Before we go into understanding what domain-driven design is, important for us to understand what a domain is. A domain is simply a subject area that you are trying to solve a problem for. And so it is an area that you want to build a software solution for. For example, if you wanted to build a solution for the problem of transferring money across borders, our domain will be borderless money transfer, because that is the problem we are trying to find a solution for. And so domain-driven design is a way to model our software that allows us to program a rich model for our domain. It allows for business people and the software team or the development team to have a shared understanding of the model. This allows us to build quality software and also build software that is easily understood by all the different areas of our organization. For me to explain further what domain-driven design is, I'm going to show you using an illustration of a contrived school management system as an example. And so domain-driven design comes with two very important patterns: the strategic pattern and the tactical pattern. The strategic pattern has to do more with the high-level overview of our software. It takes a very high-level approach to building out a model for our domain. The tactical, on the other hand, is more low-level. It's closer to the code, and so it deals more with objects and modules and classes. It's what you do on a day-to-day once you have a very rich model built. In terms of what I want to say is, when you have a rich model that you build through the strategic pattern. And so we'll take a look at the first strategic pattern, which is the bounded context. And like I said, we are using a contrived version of a school management system. And so we want to build a solution for managing a school. And so that's our domain. And so our domain is very large, and it will be very important for us to break our domain into small sub-domains. And that's what bounded contexts have to do with. They have to do with breaking up our larger domain into smaller, more manageable or more understandable domains. And so for an example of a school management system, you're going to have different bounded contexts. Bounded contexts have to do with sets of processes that are clearly bounded within a scope. So for our school management system, you can see we have an academic management bounded context, things that have to do with the academics of the school. And so we'll mostly be dealing with things like which student belongs to which course, which college belongs to or has these courses, etc., etc. We also have a bounded context accounts, which have to do with the accounting aspects of our school management system. And so we want to be able to know which students have paid which fees. Have salaries been paid to these professors? How much salary is this professor taking? How much arrears does this student have? Things like that. And so we can see that within our larger domain of a school, we have these different units that perform very specific roles. And so bounded context allows us to be able to break up the school management system into these different units that perform all of these specific roles. So we have the reporting bounded context, the residency management bounded context, and we can have other bounded contexts as well. And then let's look at the second strategic pattern, ubiquitous language. Now, for all of these bounded contexts, it's important for us to have a specific set of vocabulary that we use within the bounded context that allows us to understand the processes and the different objects within that bounded context. So for us to understand what an ubiquitous language is, and I touched on having a specific set of vocabulary, let's take a look at these two sentences, try to understand what is going on. And so the first sentence reads, once a student completes their fee payment, the student can proceed to enroll in their course. Let's take a look at the second sentence. A student should be able to register for a course when they settle their fees. Now, when you take a closer look at these two sentences, you realize that they're talking about the same thing. A student being able to, say, take a course once they paid for their fees. But you can see that you are using slightly different terms, slightly different words. And so to take away any type of ambiguity, it's important for us to define these words and stick to a specific set of vocabulary so that when we are discussing about our bounded context, we can have a consistent use of words and a consistent use of words that takes away any type of, confusion. For example, settle mean that you're going to pay fees after you have arrears or you're paying fees outright. It's important for us to define these vocabulary and be able to have a specific set of vocabulary so that we take away any type of confusion. So that's what has to do with an ubiquitous language. And every bounded context must have its own ubiquitous language so that business people and developers can collaborate easily. Then we look at the first tactical pattern, entities. Let's scroll inside a bit to see what's happening there. So entities are simply the objects that live within a bounded context. You can think of them as the value within that context, the value within that business subdomain. These are things that have to interact with each other to be able to give a bounded context meaning. And so for an academic management, we want to know which students have enrolled in which course. And so we have a student entity, which is an object, a course, which is an object within the bounded context. Then we want to know which lecturers teach which courses. So we have a lecturer entity. Similarly, we have the college, which courses belong to which college. So these are the different objects that live within the bounded context that gives the bounded context meaning. It allows the bounded context to run certain type of business processes and align to certain types of business rules. You cannot have academics without the students. Students and lecturers must exist for there to be some kind of academic type of processes. So that's what has to do with entities. Similarly, we can see the accounting bounded context, for example, which has a student and a lecturer there again. Yes, there's a repeated entity between the two contexts. However, a student in an accounting sense may differ from a student in an academic sense. Usually we want to see this difference, right? So when we try to understand what a student is in an accounting sense, we want to know whether a student owes fees, whether a student has paid their fees. An academic context would have nothing to do, wouldn't really care about whether a student has paid their fees or owes any fees. They only deal with the academics of the students, what courses they've taken, what is their grade point average, things like that, right? The residency management also has a notion of a student and it has a room. We want to know which students are assigned to which rooms. And so all of these different entities live in these different bounded contexts to give that bounded context meaning and to be able to align to a business rule or a business process. In our case, a school management system and all of its internal processes. And then we look at the second tactical pattern, aggregates. And so simply put, an aggregate is a combination of two or more entities. So it's usually formed by way of something happening in a domain or an interaction between two entities. Once there's an interaction between two entities, usually an aggregate is formed. So in our academic management bounded context, for example, when a student enrolls for a course, we create an aggregate out of that. Course enrollment has occurred, and so we want to store that course enrollment within our bounded context to be able to tell which students have enrolled in which courses. Same for the residency management context. We want to know which student belongs to which room. So when a student, say, registers for a particular room, we're able to keep a record of the residency enrollment. We're able to tell which student belongs to which room by way of this aggregate. And then we'll go to our third and final tactical pattern, domain events. A domain event is simply something that has occurred in your system. It's a record of what has occurred in your system. So when there's any change in your system, we emit a domain event, or a domain event is created. And so, for example, when within our academic management bounded context, a student enrolls for a course, we can say that a course has been enrolled, which is a domain event. Something occurred within that subdomain of academic management system. Or when a student registers for a room within a residency management, you can say a residency enrollment has occurred. It is an event that has occurred within that bounded context. Now, when an event occurs, it could be emitted, right? When an event occurs within a bounded context, that bounded context can emit that event to any bounded context that needs it, right? It's a very important thing to know, especially if you want to go into microservices. But we are not going to talk about microservices today. But just know that domain-driven design is a very good way to build very fine-grained and very quality microservice architecture-based software applications. And so what I was talking about, let's get back to what I was talking about. For example, if the academic management bounded context requires that a student pay their fees before they can enroll in a course, well, once a student pays for fees, right, which is handled by the accounting bounded context, we can fire off an event to the academic management. And once our academic management picks up that event, you can say, hey, okay, this student has paid for this fees, and then it can make that student eligible to enroll in a course. And so you can see how all of these different bounded contexts interact with each other, even though they work very isolated from each other. There's still certain collaboration that needs to occur to be able to give us the overall value within our domain. Our system can give that overall value, right? That overall business value. So that's what domain events are. And so that's just a contrived explanation of what domain-driven design is. Hopefully it piques your interest and you would like to get into domain-driven design. I highly recommend it if you want to build large-scale software that has a lot of business complexity. Domain-driven design is definitely the best choice to go with if you want to build very easy to manage and easy to reason about software, large complex software. And yeah. And so if you want to start, you can definitely pick up these two books, Domain-Driven Design by Eric Evans, which is sort of like the inception of where domain-driven design comes from, really. Or you can read a smaller version of what domain-driven design distilled by Van Vernon. It's an interesting read. I've personally read that, and I'll definitely recommend it to you. I have looked a bit into domain-driven design, the actual book, but I haven't been able to go end to end with it. But from what I've learned and from what I've been told by most of the DDD practitioners, is that it's definitely a good book to read if you want to get into domain-driven design, although it can be a bit more complex. So you would like to start with something a bit lightweight, especially if you're a beginner. So I'll definitely also invite you to Ortelius community. We are building a microservices catalog that allows us to track and version all of our different microservices and track the S-bombs and all of these different microservices that we may have in our application. And so these are the links to join. Definitely a very great community to join of diverse people. We talk about domain-driven design. We talk about microservices, S-bombs, how we track and version, all of these different microservices. And yeah, it's a great place to come and learn and just, hang out and contribute to something valuable as well. So definitely come check us out. If you want to have a conversation with me, hit me up, have a question, those are my socials. You can definitely link up with me. And thank you for joining me on this talk. It's been great. Ciao.